All right, here we go. Let's talk today about reciprocals. Okay, so we're on page 621 in your text. So if you're not already there, take a moment, pause me, and get your book, and make sure you have your paper ready so you're ready to not necessarily take notes, but to do the work with me as we go. Okay. All right, so what is a reciprocal? A reciprocal is the opposite of a number. Okay, so you guys see my purple and pink. I love these colors together. Reciprocal. Instead of a definition, I'm going to give you an example. So if we had the fraction 1/2, its reciprocal would be if you flip the numerator and the denominator. It'd be 2/1. So a reciprocal is when you reverse the positions of the numbers in a fraction. Okay, it's called inverting the fraction. So if we had 2/3, what would the reciprocal of 2/3 be? Flip it and put the 3 on top and the 2 on the bottom. Okay, and I realize it makes an improper fraction, but that's fine. We're just talking about reciprocals here. And we can even do this, and I'm on page 622. If you're following along, I'm just going through, I'm just using my own words instead of the words in the book. We can even do this with a whole number. Whole numbers have reciprocals as well. Like if I had, I'll write it over here, the number 2, for example, any whole number we know we can write as a fraction over 1. So 2 wholes is the same as 2/1, and so then the reciprocal of 2/1 is 1/2. So that means that the reciprocal of 2 is 1/2. So to find the hopefully this is working, I'm having a little technical difficulties. To find the reciprocal of a number, you are just going to flip, if it's a fraction, you're just going to flip it. If it's a whole number, you're going to take that number and think about it as being a fraction over 1, and then you are going to flip that. All right, so something to know about reciprocals. Interesting note, the product, and this is right in your book, but I'm going to write it out, of any number, and that's my and symbol, remember, its reciprocal is 1. All right, so any number that we multiply by its reciprocal, we're going to get to 1. So let's think about that. I told you that 1/2's reciprocal is 2/1. So if I multiply 1/2 times 2/1, let's think about what happens. Well, we multiply fractions. We multiply top times top and bottom times bottom. So 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 1 is 2. And so we get 2/2, which equals 1 whole. And so it works. The product of any number and its reciprocal is 1. If I had another example, 2/3. If I multiply it by its reciprocal, 3/2. Remember, top times top, so 2 times 3 is 6. Bottom times bottom, 3 times 2 is 6. So we get 6/6. And again, it is 1. So the product, when you multiply any number times its reciprocal, you are going to get 1. Okay? So, and then if we look down at example 1, it asks, what is the reciprocal of 5/6? Example 1. What is the reciprocal of 5/6? So go ahead and write down the reciprocal of 5/6. Okay, so you should have flipped it around. It is 6/5. The reciprocal of 5/6 is 6/5. And yes, it's an improper fraction, but you want to leave it as an improper fraction. And that might really bother some of you because you know you're supposed to simplify and make it into a mixed number. But when it's a reciprocal, the whole point is for it to be flipped like that. So you can't make it into a mixed number when the whole purpose is to find the reciprocal. You should leave it as an improper fraction. Okay? So I want you to pause the video and I want you to do lesson practice. Let's do A, B, C, and D. And then go ahead and restart the video to check your work once you're done. All right, so for lesson practice A, we had 4/5. So you should have written 5/4 as the reciprocal. For lesson practice B, we had 6/5. So you should have written 5/6 as the reciprocal. For lesson practice C, we had the whole number 3. And so remember, you're going to take that 3 and you're going to make it into 3/1. So then its reciprocal would be 1/3. And then for lesson practice D, we had 7/8, and so your reciprocal should have been 8/7. And remember, you should leave them as improper fractions for each of those. Okay. All right, let's look at example 2. All right, we're looking at example 2, top of page 623. It says, what is the product of 1/3 and its reciprocal? Well, you might remember because we talked about this earlier in the video, but let's go ahead and do it out. Let's multiply 1/3 times its reciprocal. So what's the reciprocal of 1/3? It would be 3/1, yes. I'm going to say yes, assuming that you said that. 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 1 is 3. And so we end up with 3/3, which is equal to? I wish I could see you raising your hands. I miss you guys a lot. Equal to 1 whole, which you might have already remembered that because we talked about the fact that any number times its reciprocal equals 1. All right, let's do example 3. We have, what is the reciprocal of 4? All right, so what did I tell you to do with a whole number? What is the reciprocal of 4? What's the first thing we need to do? We need to take it, put it over 1. And then once we have it as a fraction, then it's much easier to see what we need to do with it. We need to flip the numbers. And so its reciprocal is 1/4. Now, before we move on to example 4, I'm going to have you pause the video again, and I want you to do lesson practice I, lesson practice J, lesson practice K, and lesson practice L. So please pause the video and do those 4 and then restart to check your work. All right, for lesson practice I, we have the number 2. So hopefully you put it as 2/1 and then you made its reciprocal 1/2. For lesson practice J, 1/5 becomes 5/1. Lesson practice K, the whole number 10, again, you put it as a fraction over 1, and so its reciprocal is 1/10. And lesson practice L, we have the number 1, and so you write it as a fraction over 1. And then when you flip it, you still get 1/1. Its reciprocal is the same thing. Weird, right? All right, let's look at example 4. Okay. All right, example 4. All right, we have to divide 1 divided by 3/4. Okay, so what does this problem mean? Well, this problem is asking us how many 3/4 are in 1. Okay, so when we divide 1 by any number other than 0, the quotient's going to be the reciprocal. So you are going to figure out that the answer here is actually going to be so when we look at the answer, what we're going to notice is that any time you divide 1, this is something you're going to want to write down on your paper. All right. I'm thinking of how I want us to word it. Whenever I'm going to write it out and then we'll talk, okay? Let me tell you guys, I have to look at the word reciprocal every time I write it. Okay, whenever you divide 1 by a number, the answer is the reciprocal of that number. So 1 divided by 3/4, this is the number, okay? So the rule is the answer is going to be the reciprocal of that number, okay? So which we could simplify to 1 1/3. So when we have to do, if we look at practice ends, I just want you to follow this rule. Whenever you're doing 1 divided by a fraction, the answer is going to be that fraction flipped around. So if we look at lesson practice M, lesson practice M asks us how many 3/5 are in 1. So that's doing the same thing. You're doing 1 divided by 3/5. So to figure out how many 3/5 are in 1, you're going to follow this rule. So anytime you're dividing 1, your answer is going to be the reciprocal of the number that you're dividing by. So it's going to be 5/3. Okay? Which, since we're not just asking the reciprocal here, we're actually asking for the answer to a division problem, you could simplify it to 1 2/3. And I would accept either answer would be fine for this. Okay? So I want you to pause the video and do lesson practice N. For lesson practice N, you're doing 1 divided by 4/5. So go ahead and pause the video and do that, and then restart to check your work. All right, so since you're taking 1 and dividing it by a number, your answer is going to be the reciprocal of that number. So your answer is 5/4, which we could simplify to 1 1/4. So I would accept either of those answers. All right, so you are all set for the video, unless you feel like you need to rewatch it. But other than that, you may go ahead and head back on over to Google Classroom to see your assignment for today.